Well, my watch shows 3:30 and change, so we'll get started. Thanks for showing up, everybody. It's nice to be between you and cocktail hour. I'm Paul Rohde with the Waterways Council, and we're going to talk about infrastructure. That's been a topic of quite a bit of news over the last several months and years, really, going back to the previous administration as well. We're going to talk about what are the needs of infrastructure on inland waterways. There's lots of definitions of infrastructure. As far as inland waterways goes, you know, we're not going to talk about routers or buoy tenders or channel maintenance or dredging or even dams. That's going to be the next big infrastructure panel in a few years. Funding of the dams, which are also aging. But I'm going to focus on locks primarily, and we've got some great speakers lined up that'll kind of talk about their world as well. The big question in my mind is this administration okay? So that is not the order of slides. Well, that's all right. We're fake it till you make it, right? Is this administration friendly to our industry and the other stakeholders? And I think the answer for me is that's still to be determined. But one way that we can answer that question is the annual appropriations process. And for the administration, that's the budget, which we don't have yet. We've got a skinny budget that came out last month, but we don't have the full budget. That'll be out on the 27th. And so we'll see where locks and dams fall with the administration. We've had not a wide variety of difference over the last several administrations. It hasn't looked good. And that's where groups like Waterways Council comes in to step in and reach out to Congress and make our case for funding and authorization in some cases. So we'll see what the administration has as far as a budget goes. On the other side of Washington, D.C., over on the Capitol, it comes down to appropriations. And we've got a pretty significant delay with the fiscal year 22 appropriations because we don't have a budget yet. The House has started, the Senate has just started, but they really can't do much until they see a budget come out. So we're probably in the immediate term looking at a continuing resolution, or CR, as they call it. So short-term funding to get us through, because we won't have there are 12 appropriations bills. We won't have those finished by the end of the fiscal year, September 30th. And Lou with the Corps of Engineers can talk about how that messes up with the Corps schedule. Not having the funding is one thing, but not having any funding when you need it is a separate but related issue. So new this year, the bright shiny penny is community project funding. Also known as earmarks, as you may have be familiar with that phrase, or I like to call it congressionally directed funding. This is another chance to fund lock and dam infrastructure. The House has wrapped up or is wrapping up their process of taking these requests from individual members, and they've got a whole set of rules I put up there. You can have up to 10. And so we've been making our case to have locks and dams included in their requests. We have wrapped up or are wrapping up that process on the House side. The Senate side has just started that process. So we're still working with our senators to make our case for locks and dams. Separate from that is the infrastructure plan. So President Biden on March 31st unveiled the America's Jobs Plan. The good news is inland waterways are in there. We share a space with 3 other areas. We've got inland waterways and ports are in there, along with a program called the Healthy Ports Initiatives, ports of entries, and also ferries. So 5 total. We don't know what inland waterways is. Like, the definition of infrastructure continues to move. The definition of inland waterways, I don't know that I got a handle on that. We're hopeful that locks and dams will be a significant part of that, but with this new administration, we just aren't sure. We just don't know. The Senate Republicans have been leading the charge for the GOP to come up with their counter proposal, if you will. They've had several meetings all this month with the White House looking at a smaller scale, the overall package, smaller scale. And I think the good news is we are, number one, we're in the administration's plan. And number two, we're in the Senate GOP's plan, 17 billion, the matching number, but only for inland waterways and ports. So split 2 ways instead of split 5 ways. And so I think that is good news. We had Mayor Pete, or now he's Secretary Pete Buttigieg, was out on the river on the Pittsburgh area and looked at a lock. He is DOT, and that is not where we interact with the federal agencies. We work with the Corps of Engineers as far as locks and dams goes. But as the face of the administration, he had a lot of good things to say, and so we're hopeful that that's going to carry out in a plan. If indeed we do get a plan. There are actually 2 more plans out there. I mentioned the Senate GOP, so that's bullet 1. And then another one, an interesting one from the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is a bipartisan effort of 58 members, came up with no numbers, but just sort of a conceptual. And you can see at the very bottom there, building on a WRDA 2020, we should continue to invest in federal investment. By the way, that's an important distinction, federal investment to strengthen our inland waterways. So good things. We've got 3 plans. We're mentioned in all 3. Do we know the details? No, we don't. You're sitting in Missouri. I'm a resident of the Show Me State, so I'm fully on board with I'll believe it when I see it. But we're better positioned than we were, let's say, in 2009 with the the Obama administration when they came out with their America's Recovery Act. So that said, we don't even know if we are going to have a plan. I think we're going to have a plan, but I think you may have heard reconciliation. I think we'll probably come down to a non-bipartisan effort. This morning, Politico came out with this headline, and I love the comparison they made to the Brood-X cicadas and said, Washington's bipartisan infrastructure talks may soon look a lot like its cicada population in DC, squashed after staggering around haplessly. So I don't know I've ever heard a cicada and infrastructure compared, but for whatever it's worth, we're losing daylight, as they say, as far as a bipartisan effort on infrastructure. The good news is we as an industry have our ducks in a row. We've got a priority list of locks and dams, most of it new construction, in one case, a rehab. And this was assembled through a collaborative effort with the industry through the Inland Waterways Trust Fund and the Corps of Engineers to look at the prioritization of authorized projects and how do we get at it. It started in 2010. They just came out with a new version in 2020. This was the impetus for the increase in the diesel fuel. If you followed this at all back in 2014, the industry and stakeholders voluntarily and unanimously asked for an increase of 45% so that we could have the money, the private funds, to get after this backlog of projects. We've had some pretty good successes since then, most of it with a cost share shift. If you follow WCI at all, you have heard those 3 words many, many times. In 2014, it started with Olmsted. We made our case that instead of 50% of that diesel fuel tax going towards the completion of Olmsted, we should adjust that, and Congress did do 85-15. We made that case successfully with Chickamauga Lock to get at finishing that. And last year in a water resources bill, we got a successful 65-35 split for an 11-year period. So our trust fund dollars, the private funds going towards this selection of projects, is going to go farther. There are some ongoing core studies that could be added to this as well. Bayou Sorrel, the Inner Harbor Navigation Canal forever. We've talked about that in the Gulf Intercoastal Waterway, High Island of Brazos, and others that could be on this list. So we have made the case to Congress that we've got a priority list. We know what it's going to cost, and we've even said we're willing to pay for part of that. Let's hope that we can continue to work with Congress. If we can't get further clarity with the administration on an infrastructure bill or a budget, we will continue to work with Congress to make sure that inland waterways are in there. I would like to make a plug for you all to come to our annual symposium. This year, it's going to be in St. Louis, November 2nd through the 4th, over at the Lowe's, the Live by Lowe's Hotel in Ballpark Village, where some of you will be tonight. We would welcome your participation in Waterways Council, and we've got lots of opportunities through social media to stay connected. If you want to be an advocate, it's as easy as using your smartphone. Just text the word locks to 313131 and connect with us there. All right, let's get on with our panel. We're going to do questions after all four of us have spoken. Let's shift over to hear from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the needs for infrastructure that they address. And I'm happy to introduce Lou Delarco here with the St. Louis District. He was commissioned into the Corps 37 years ago this month. So you were like 5 at the time. He's got 26 years of military service. So thank you for your service, including moving up to the rank of colonel, with an impressive list of awards, including the Bronze Star with 2 Oak Leaf clusters. His assignments in the military included Operations Desert Shield, Desert Storm, Iraqi Freedom, and Enduring Freedom. He's here today as the Chief of Operations for Regulatory and Readiness Division with the St. Louis District of the Corps. Basically, that's the operations of the locks and dams in the St. Louis District, as well as the navigation channels in the Mississippi, Illinois, and Kaskaskia Rivers. So if you have any problems, talk to Lou. Anyway, Lou, come on up here and let's talk infrastructure.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay, let's hope these are in order. Oh, yeah, all right.
All right. So for those of you not familiar with the St. Louis District AOR area responsibility, it's 24 through 27 on the Miss, and then Costello on the Kaskaskia. So where are we today with strategic infrastructure? Let's take a quick look and do a mission analysis. So where are we today? Where are we headed? Where's the fog? And where's the friction? You can see a couple data points about our infrastructure. Average age is, anywhere between, they qualify for full Social Security, A. And then the other data point we have is that our annual needs for routine O&M are less than what we get in our annual appropriation. So those are the challenges right off the bat. And you can see what the outcome is you see the major lock outages from 12 through 20. So, with age, you eventually get a trend of declining reliability. And it's not a knock at all on the operators, mechanics, and engineers that work on our locks and dams, because they do one heck of a job keeping everything open and available. So aging infrastructure, what are the results to industry? Well, the results come in as unscheduled closures and scheduled closures. We all know unscheduled closures are the biggest problem with locks that aren't reliable. And it's a compounding effect, because every year those closures turn around and impact what you were scheduled to do on that lock for the rest of the year. So it's a cumulative effect that just keeps growing, and it impacts all the scheduled activities. So what we like to do with industry is scheduled closures. Nobody likes them. Nobody likes the duration, but it's in everybody's best interest to involve all the folks in the process. And the process goes with, it's essentially a negotiation of when we're going to have a scheduled closure to execute, so everybody can plan around it and maximize their effectiveness during that time. All right, where are we going? So where are we going in the Corps? It's basically a shift from improving your individual district to taking a regional look, a holistic look at the watershed and doing what's best for the watershed with the money you have allocated by Congress. So maintaining a holistic view. To that end, we're formalizing or in the process of formalizing a few processes to recapitalize our portfolio in a smart manner. And the purpose of recapitalizing it like that is to deliver the permanent repairs, the scheduled repairs we have faster. So the things we're looking at is each district validates its backlog maintenance list. What are your priorities? Should funding become available? Highest priorities, and they can compare that for the region for where to put the finite funds against. So prioritize, plan, and in the event of an infrastructure bill, in the event of the new thing for earmarks, we want to be prepared to execute should funds become available in any form or fashion. Commonality of components, every lock and dam is built based on the conditions where it resides. So there are some limited opportunities we have for common components development to reduce delay times and repair times. Paul put up the capital investment strategy. That's in everybody's best interest to be synced so we can enable the efficient funding streams and get at those permanent repairs. And then NESP, the Navigation Ecosystem Sustainment Program. We haven't talked a whole lot about it. I covered it real briefly, but be prepared to execute should it be approved in the budget. But until then, we got to manage what we got, which is the challenge. So really limited funds are the highest risk. Where we have reliability issues and consolidation of effort, we've made some strides. For instance, those of you familiar with our work, the anchorages we've taken to adjust them, address them, and then the consolidated closures we had on the Illinois waterway just to sync what we were doing and basically make sure one watershed was available if one wasn't. And then efficiently utilize all the tools we have to optimize commerce and get the authorized dimensions. So our key themes here continue to involve all equities in the process. We're partners in this. It's in everybody's business to look toward the shared vision. Determine the total program using a regional approach. So you smartest, biggest bang for your buck when you do the repairs, and produce some solid data points for how we're going to address things in the future. Because as you look on the right, it's all about the exports, industrial production, and domestic consumption that we play a role in supporting the economy. Where's the fog? I'm not going to cover this a whole lot, so you can read it, but those of you familiar with NESP for navigation, the outcomes could be 1, efficiency versus less delay time, 2, increased capacity for tonnage where it's implemented, and 3, redundancy in some areas where we currently have a single point of failure. So, it's for navigation. What's needed is a construction start to proceed. But until then, we got to manage our current portfolio of infrastructure. So NESP bottom line is need a construction start to advance and then get the benefits listed that we just talked about, and till then manage what we have in our portfolio. We get to the friction point, and the current friction point right now is as we go out there is dredging, and it's from a perspective where not all our tools can go everywhere. We've got a fleet that's old. We've got it kind of compartmentalized into areas of reaches where everything where certain dredges can go. So we want to enable a long-term channel plan where more of the dredges can eventually go to more places, because primary risk, grounding, issues with the availability of the channel. We talked about triggers, but impacts are huge, and those impacts are any grounding, because not only is it it's a bad deal for industry because you're losing money, but we're not dredging in our most efficient manner. So then we got to go back and basically execute an inefficient schedule that costs us more to take care of. So what we've all done together is those bottom 2 bullets is we put the information out there. It's widely available. Everybody's a source for when there's an issue with the channel. It gets put out there. A, it enables good planning for how you're going to load, and B, it tells you the forecast for the river and what to expect. So those are some tools we've implemented in the last few years that have got rid of the oh shucks dredging, insert your favorite phrase. And it's gone to more of a reliable system forecast where people can see where we're going to hop to next. So while we currently have limited opportunities on where we can move our dredges around with our current portfolio, we want to glean efficiencies and coordinate workloads where possible. Finally, what I would say is this is the why. We recognize that our infrastructure helps us contribute to global stability and economic prosperity. Our challenge, despite the current conditions with our infrastructure, is to provide sustainable, safe, reliable, and cost-effective commercial navigation within our current portfolio. So thank you. I know that's quick, but that's the mission analysis of our aging infrastructure.
Thanks, Lou. We're going to shift now to the shipper's point of view and start with agriculture with Mike Steenhoek, the executive director of the Soy Transportation Coalition. Soy Transportation Coalition has been around since 2007. It is 13 state soybean boards, as well as the United Soybean Board and the American Soybean Association. They're focused on intermodal transportation. And I've known Mike for, it's been 20 years now. He was a staffer with Senator Grassley when I started in this industry. And it's, I don't know how many dioceses we've shared, but I think this is the first one where you haven't, you're in Iowa anyway. Mike Steenhoek.
Well, thanks, Paul. Thanks for the opportunity to join you. If the slides can come up, just to kind of tee off the discussion, of all of the things that are grown in the United States and exported, soybeans are the #1 agricultural export. And of course, the challenge is most of that is grown in the interior part of the country, far removed from our port regions. And so to be competitive and to be profitable for farmers, you not only have to grow the crop and you not only have to have demand for the crop, but you also have to have that connectivity between supply and demand. And the inland waterway system is really integral to that. When you look at the Mississippi River, the Ohio, Illinois, those key inland waterways that allow us to transport soybeans via barge down to the New Orleans area, where 61% of U.S. soybeans depart, 59% of corn exports. So that's by far the #1 export region for both of those key commodities. But also, for the Pacific Northwest, while the journey to the Pacific Northwest, which is our second leading export region at 25%, most of that occurs via rail. The Columbia River is really critical, where a lot of our export terminals are located, just between Oregon and Washington State. And to have that river well maintained as well is really critical. So inland waterways are really essential. To go to the next slide, and Paul, the slides are coming up, right?
Yes, we are on, right now I'm on slide 3, soybean logistics flow.
Sure. And so you can see where they all are launched from. So, we obviously require roads and bridges, highways and interstates, freight rail, inland waterways and ports to be successful. The next slide, just wanted to highlight a couple things that we are working on. Clearly, the status of our locks and dams is a major priority for our industry, and we work with Waterways Council and other stakeholders to really promote proper investment in it. But one of the projects that we're very pleased to see progress being made on is again the #1 export region for soybeans and corn, which is the lower Mississippi River, that 256-mile stretch of the river, starting at Baton Rouge, going past New Orleans into the Gulf of Mexico. And we were to see that project get the green light in February of 2020. The governor of Louisiana, flanked by senior members of the Army Corps of Engineers, signed the agreement, really activating the project in late July of last year. And the actual deepening work commenced on September 11th of last year. And currently that first stretch of the deepening project, there are 3 phases. The first phase attends to the area by the Gulf itself, that Southwest Pass region. That is 90+% complete. And so that will be really critical because that will open up the river to a 50-foot or greater depth, all the way up to mile 154. So that it extends past New Orleans. And then the subsequent steps are to remove pipelines north of that mile 154, and then that are under the river, and relocate them, and then doing the remaining deepening all the way up to Baton Rouge. And so that will be really critical. One of the things that we were really proud of is that we kind of provided a new way of funding some of these projects. 75% of this project is funded by the federal government, 25% non-federal. And we were able to provide $2 million of money from soybean farmers to help underwrite the cost of the non-federal share. And so that was new. That was kind of a new kind of innovative public-private partnership between the federal government, the state of Louisiana, and soybean farmers to help move this project forward. We were really pleased to work with the leadership down in Louisiana to move this project forward. If you want to proceed to the slide related to the Missouri River, something that we're continuing to work on is promoting what we think is a pretty underutilized waterway. The Missouri River will never rival the Mississippi, the Ohio, the Illinois, any of the other major rivers in terms of volume of freight handled, but we think it's a missed opportunity that there are significant areas of the country that have proximity to the inland waterway system but have little access to the inland waterway system. Areas like western Iowa, eastern Nebraska, eastern Kansas, lots of the state of Missouri, even South Dakota, where you're close to the inland waterway system. That's what it means when you have proximity to something, but just because you have proximity doesn't mean you have access. Access is when you're able to derive utility from something. And so we want to increase access to it. We're very pleased that the photo is of a groundbreaking that happened last year in September for a new barge loading facility in the town of Blencoe, Iowa, which is north of Council Bluffs, Omaha. And the groundbreaking happened last year. The ribbon cutting will happen next week, and that will now be the furthest north barge loading and unloading facility on the Missouri River. And so we're happy to see progress being made on the Missouri. One of the things that I contend with all of the challenges related to the Missouri, and we certainly acknowledge them, we're aware of them. But that being said, I still believe that the reputation of the Missouri River is worse than its actual potential. We think it could be more of an effective navigation opportunity for this country. And so we look forward to helping promote that. There kind of is an unfortunate chicken versus the egg kind of dynamic that happens with the Missouri River. And that's where the federal government will say, why should we invest more vigorously in the Missouri River until we see more traffic on the Missouri River? And potential utilizers say, well, why should we direct traffic to the Missouri River until we see more of a financial commitment by the federal government toward the Missouri River? So you kind of have this chicken versus the egg dynamic. And so we think it's very significant to see these kind of investments like the one in Blencoe, like more traffic going in and out of St. Joseph, Missouri, more out of Kansas City, the port of Kansas City. Seeing that uptick in traffic, we think is very favorable and hopefully can kind of get us dislodged from that chicken versus the egg dynamic, to see more attention being devoted to the Missouri. We have this aspiration to use this maritime highway. We think it's time to actually be more committed to it, and that includes the Missouri River. So with that, I know we have still some remaining speakers, so I will just conclude my comments there, and I look forward to participating in the Q&A. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. Let's move on to manufacturer's perspective. We have with us David Looms, the Vice President for the supply chain for Continental Cement. David's got 28 years in the building materials industry, mostly in finance, commercial, and supply chain roles. He led the supply chain group for Wholesome US and the post-merger supply chain for Lafarge Wholesome U.S., delivering the single largest cost synergy in that merger. He's most recently from Boston. He's transitioning from a Red Sox Bruins fan into the much classier choice of Cardinals and Blues. When he starts talking, I'll answer the first question you're going to have. He's from South Africa originally, so you're probably a Springboks fan as well. Okay, very good. So please welcome David Looms.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, I've started the transition process from Boston sports to St. Louis sports, both of whom have great legacies and great fans. So looking forward to becoming a Blues fan. Love hockey, but also cards as well. So anyway, I've spent a fair bit of time in the industry, as Paul mentioned, and thank you, Paul, for giving me time to talk. I'm between you and drinks. So this won't take long. The cement industry is a small part of the overall river volume. So I'm here to talk to you about, from our perspective, why the infrastructure is so important, what it means to a company like Continental. There's many such stories like our own, and many industries like our own that are absolutely vitally dependent on the infrastructure and the new renewal and the upgrade and more efficient infrastructure in the waterways. And Lou, I'd like to thank you and your team and the Corps overall. You guys do a heck of a job with limited resources, and you keep the lights on and you keep things moving. So thank you. I know there's a lot of work that goes on in the background, tireless efforts to keep things moving. So much appreciated. Continental has 2 cement plants, one in Davenport, Iowa, Hannibal, Missouri is the other one. We have 9 distribution terminals. You can see the map on the screen. We go from, in the north, you go from Minneapolis all the way down to Louisiana. And about 40% of our total production is shipped by the river. There's the obvious benefits, cost, environmental safety. Those are really important to us. But it's the way we operate and the way it keeps us competitive in those markets is the river. Now, in the last 2 years, we've had to spend about $12 million, which is a significant hit for our company on disruptions, lock closures, inventory, et cetera. And we run a very tight supply chain. We have to in our business. Our customers depend on us being reliable and having the right product, right place, right time. And so when disruptions like this happen, it sends a shockwave, not through our industry, but everything downstream from us, which is construction. When I say us, I'm talking the industry. You've got some much larger producers on the river. Lafarge Holcim's one, Bootsy's another, all of whom will tell you the similar story. And that 12 million that Continental spent will be exponentially more based on the tonnages that they spend. But that's the kind of disruption that occurs when we don't have the investments needed in the infrastructure. So, I guess my ask and my plea for support for the Waterways Council, for the initiatives to drum up support, to drum up advocacy with your elected representatives to get the funding where it needs to go. This resource is strategic. It's imperative. There's nothing that can replace it, and it needs renewal. It needs upgrade. So those are really my key messages. I think on the next slide, there's a lot of the points that I've made. Yeah, there we go. So just some facts on the cement industry itself. 68% of all terminals, and cement is manufactured at a big central plant, and then we ship it out to terminals, rail terminals, barge terminals, and to a less extent truck. But 68% of terminals in the cement industry nationally are marine based. Okay, that translates to, it's about 36, depending on the year, 36, 38% of all cement shipped in the country goes out on water. And that water is, of course, the waterway system. So it gives you an idea, not just from a continental perspective, but from an industry perspective, where that cement goes, why it's so important for this infrastructure to be upgraded and renewed. It's highly competitive. There's no alternative that comes close to matching the waterways network. We do periodically, we try and mitigate some supply disruptions. You can truck, but you can only truck so far. You can only rail so far. You can only reach so many points with rail. So again, fully support the investment. The industry supports it individually, but also through the Portland Cement Association and the many other industries in the same boat. So I am a small part of that. I think we're about 4% of the overall river volume. So not a big player in the grand scheme of things. Agriculture, steel, et cetera, is much larger than us. But we all have this common vested interest. So that's my plea for help, plea for support, and getting everything done. Paul, thanks to you and your team for all the hard work that you guys do as well.
Thank you, David. Not on. User error, maybe. Is this on? There we go. Thank you. Thanks, David. Let's go to questions now. We appreciate you sticking out with us, and we'll be happy to hang out after the session's over with as well. And I want to recognize my coworker, Deb Calhoun. Any question to me, I'll just divert it over to Deb. But no, is any questions for any of the panelists? All right, then. Well, we will stick around and be available, and we appreciate your focus and attention, and enjoy the rest of Inland Marine Expo. Thanks.